Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the latest round of video-linked talks which took place between the UK and the EU concerning a Brexit agreement at the end of last week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, the talks themselves are not streamed publicly, of course, so we have to rely on press releases to find out what progress, if any, is being made. So David Frost, on behalf of the UK, said that round 2 of the negotiations had been constructive. Fantastic, nice one. Looking forward to hearing what progress has been made then. But turns out none at all, because the very next statement he said, after saying that the talks were constructive, was explaining what he thinks needs to happen for any progress to actually happen. So it's like, oh, okay, so no progress has been made yet then? Oh, no. And you haven't agreed a way to make progress for the future. No, because this is what I think needs to happen. Right? Okay. So yeah, there we are. No progress and no agreement on progress. Because the talks last week, if we're honest, were supposed to be really talks about talks. You know, some of these talks are talks about the agreement. Some of them are talks about talks. How do we, go from here? Now, the talks about talks should have been concluded really in February. But they keep agreeing, the UK keep agreeing things and then going back on it. That's been a bit of a problem. Now, what David Frost did say was that there was no need for novel and unprecedented level playing field rules, known to be a firm red line for the EU, of course. Now, anyone paying attention at all to these discussions will know that the EU have good reason to insist on the level playing field rules. And even if you didn't accept that, let's just say, it is their rights to insist on it anyway. Either side in the negotiation can insist on whatever red lines it likes. The EU is no different. But what Frost said about the rules was objectively wrong. It's not a matter of opinion, it's objectively wrong. He called them novel and unprecedented. Well, they're not novel because the EU insisted that they be the core of any future agreement before the Brexit referendum had even taken place. That was years ago. Novel means new. It's not new. They're also not unprecedented because these rules apply to every single European country with whom the EU have a comprehensive trade agreement. So they're not novel, they're not unprecedented. That is actually just a lie. And he's not a stupid man using words incorrectly. He knows what the words mean. He's just lying. Now, in his press release, Michel Barnier said that the UK was not engaging in the talks in any meaningful way. And quite frankly, it's hard to argue that when our chief negotiator was making statements that are clearly false. Barnier also said that Boris Johnson was seeking to cherry-pick the benefits without accepting the responsibilities. And this is also clearly the case, and it's baffling to me that even Brexit supporters would think that we should somehow have the right to cherry-pick these things. In other words, get the benefits of membership and say, we'll have that, that's a benefit, we'll have that. Oh no, we're not going to accept the responsibilities though. Well, how does that make sense? Because if, let's say we had this agreement where we got to get all the benefits but none of the responsibilities, some of which, by the way, logistically are impossible, but let's just go into this land of unicorns and pixies. Then what's the benefit to anyone else being in the EU? None at all. So then the EU would cease to exist. And then we still wouldn't have the benefits because there's no EU there to give us those benefits. So it's all absolute nonsense. You know, for example, the talks this year, so how the talks were supposed to proceed, this is what was agreed before we'd even left. It wasn't supposed to be a ramshackle series of proposals and counter-proposals. You know, each side turning up to the talks with their agenda and going, right, we want to talk about this. Well, we want to talk about this. All right, we'll see what we can fit in. No. And then at the end of the year, you somehow see if you've got an agreement. That's not how it was supposed to work. There was a timetable with things to be discussed throughout the year. And we're not sticking to it. One example was we were supposed to have decided by June, well, a number of things, because what was supposed to happen is we're supposed to have agreed this part of it, this part, and this part of it by June, because then at that point, we can see if the prospect of getting the full agreement in place by the end of the year is possible. If not, you might want to think about extending. Just putting that out there. Now, fishing rights was one of the things that we were supposed to have agreed by June. But the UK is not even talking about it. Of course not, because the UK doesn't actually want an agreement. When I say the UK, I mean the UK government, the negotiating team, doesn't actually want an agreement. And the issue is a hot potato, so they don't even want to talk about it. And at its core, the UK's position is that the European Court of Justice should not have jurisdiction to decide matters of European law. Well, that is not a concession that the EU even give to the much mightier United States of America. They are certainly not going to give it to Britain when we seem to be on a mission to massively throw away what power and influence we still have in the world. It should also be noted that the UK have still not provided the legal text needed to move negotiations on. The EU, just to remind you, provided a 350-page proposal. That was their legal text, which Boris Johnson, of course, dismissed, but he hasn't provided one of his own. They announced a while ago that they were going to provide it imminently, because I talked about this some time ago, saying that we hadn't even provided ours. And then the news came out, we're going to exchange legal text very soon. I thought, oh, okay, that'll be interesting. And then the news came out, right, we've exchanged legal text with the EU now. Oh, okay, I'll have a look at that. No, they haven't. They haven't. It's a little bit of a fib, only a little bit of a fib. Technically, they've given the EU some legal text, but the legal text is not for a comprehensive trade agreement, which is what we're supposed to be negotiating. It was for a few individual bilateral agreements on things like aviation and Europol, policing. It's like, so where's the legal text for the agreement that you're proposing? It's not there. It still doesn't exist now. We're now at the end of April. Still not there. Should have been there in February. So it should have been there years ago. Because Boris Johnson is one of the people who's arguing for Brexit. Well, if you're saying Brexit's such a great idea, then presumably you've got some idea in your mind about what Brexit will look like. So where is it? Where's your paper on it? It has never existed. It hasn't existed for years. No Brexiteer has ever published anything. So the situation now remains as it was in February. The EU have proposed an agreement that the UK have rejected. Okay. And the UK haven't proposed an agreement at all. So there's literally nothing to be discussed. The normal thing is, obviously the EU come up with their idea of agreement. Now, obviously it stands to reason that the EU's proposal is going to benefit the EU, not really the UK. That's not their priority. We understand that, and we understand that that's probably not going to be what it eventually looks like. Then the idea is that the other party, the UK in this case, provides its proposal. Now, again, it's understood that the UK's proposal will be one that provides as much benefit to the UK as possible, and it won't be something the EU will go for. And then what you do with the two legal texts is you see areas of crossover, you agree those, and then you work to try and compromise on the other areas until you've got something that is somewhere between the two. But all we have at the moment is the EU proposal. We don't have the UK proposal. So you can't discuss common areas of agreement because there is nothing to compare it to. You can't work out a way to move the two sides together because there isn't a second position to move to. This is the problem. And for all those moaning that the EU the EU's been mean, it's not considering the UK's proposals, I have two things to say. One, you are basically complaining that the UK is weak. Stop crying, for goodness sake. We said years ago that the UK alone would not be strong enough to get a better deal than the membership. We said that. You were the ones saying that the UK holds all the cards. Well, where are the cards? Where are they? Why are you whining and sobbing and crying about the EU being mean if we are so strong? And the second thing is, where is this proposal that you are moaning at the EU for not accepting? Where is it? Link it. Doesn't exist. They haven't sent one to the EU. They haven't published one for us to see. There isn't one. It does not exist. So there is now only one of two possibilities. One is that the transition period is extended, probably for years, and we let Brexit slowly fizzle out. That's fine from our point of view. From the government's point of view, I'm not sure how they do that politically because they have massively painted themselves into a corner on this one. I talked about that a couple of weeks ago. The second possibility is you crash out without any agreement whatsoever. Okay, politically they can do that in the short term without any major comeback until, of course, the hard Brexit reality hits, in which case you prepare for not even years, decades of devastation to the British way of life, and goodness only knows what people will think of that. And that's it. Those are your two choices. That is basically it. There was never a chance at a trade deal anyway, even without this coronavirus pandemic, because, well, they take years. David Frost wants to talk about unprecedented. He wants to use the word unprecedented. Fine. It's unprecedented in agreeing and implementing a trade deal in 11 months. 11 years is much more the norm. 11 months? No, never been done. Not even close. That is unprecedented. And that's for two parties that want agreement as well. Because another thing that's unprecedented is actually holding trade negotiations where one side doesn't even want a deal, doesn't even engage constructively with the talks. So that is the situation at the moment. Few other bits and pieces to talk about over the coming week, but that is the main take home from last week's talk, or at least the press releases of last week's talks. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.